Thank you very much. Now we have a very important session. We have with us Dr. Magdal Dr. Sharon Magdal. She's Director of University of Arizona Water Resource Center, and she is leading a very important panel. We are going to learn about very important examples about the water management in different basins from all around the world.
Okay, I need my panelists up here, and if you sit in the order of Mr. Bokan Makututsa, Mr. Dejan Kornatina, Mr. Gustav Borchardt, Mr. Ed Dracina, and Mr. Roberto Salmon. And while they're walking up, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we're going to do the panel, some introductory remarks, and then we'll get to work here. So my name is Sharon Magdal. I'm Director of the Water Resources Research Center at the University of Arizona in the United States. I'm a frequent visitor to this region, and I'm just delighted and honored to have been asked to moderate this panel. I want to thank EcoPeace for that. And I also want to particularly thank Mira Edelstein for spending all of her Saturday with the two commissioners from the International Boundary and Water Commission and myself showing us the lower Jordan River. We spent a full day out there. So we have 5 panelists here, and each is going to answer 2 questions that they were given in advance. The basic questions: why was the commission formed, the commission that each one represents, and what have you accomplished? What issues have you dealt with? What have you accomplished? And so they'll each come up and make a few remarks. I think they may have some maps, some photos or 2. And then I will continue on if there's time. Depends upon how long each one takes, because we have about 75 minutes for the whole panel. We started just about 5 minutes late, so we're pretty good on time. And then I have a number of follow-up questions. The idea is that the questions and discussion with the audience will occur at the breakout sessions that will follow the break that we have. And so we're not really set up for questions from the audience right here at this panel, because there won't be time. So that's how we're going to conduct the session. And I just want to give a few words of introduction of each one. Their titles are on your program, but Mr. Bokan Makututsa is one of 3 commissioners from Lesotho, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that. He's been a commissioner since 2012. He's a water lawyer, and he served as a legal advisor to the water minister of Lesotho. And then Dr. Dejan Kornatina is a civil engineer with 27 years of national and international work in environmental river engineering, and he's the Secretary General of the Sava River Basin, and has lots of interesting experience in his bio. Mr. Gustav Borchardt is also a lawyer, and he, as you know, is chair of the Rhine of the Commission. He was active for many years with the Rhine and with the European Commission, and he has been a legal judicial advisor and has very extensive experience. Mr. Ed Dracina, who is the U.S. Commissioner of the International Boundary and Water Commission, that's at the U.S.-Mexico border, is an engineer. He's been commissioner since 2010 and has extensive experience both with government and the private sector as an engineer. And then finally, Commissioner Roberto Salmon is the Mexican commissioner from the International Boundary and Water Commission. I believe you've been commissioner since 2008, is that correct? I thought that was the date. And perhaps the most notable thing from my perspective is he's the graduate of the University of Arizona with multiple degrees in resource economics. So welcome, gentlemen, and join me in welcoming the panel. And I'm going to stay seated here because there's no space between here and the podium, and because some of you have slides, They're going to move them sequentially, I believe, for us. Somebody magically is appearing behind me to do that. And so if, I don't know that there's a remote, so if you're wanting to advance slides, I suggest you get up to the podium and come down. Okay? Everybody good with that? So let's start with you, Mr. Bokan. You want to speak here?
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharon. Thank you for the introduction. I would like to express my gratitude for being invited to this forum. I am Bokan Makututsa, as already addressed. I represent Lesotho as the commissioner in the Organization River Commission in Southern Africa. The commission is an organization shared by the 4 member states, that is Lesotho upstream, South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia downstream. I think it is best to indicate that the commission establishment was influenced by the international agreements, and specifically the regional agreement in the SADC protocol on shared water courses. Apart from that, I should be very specific and go to the important point that there are a number of issues that need to be addressed in the Orange Sinku River Basin. And those involve issues like water quality, the water pollution, degradation of the environment in the basin. All this informed the establishment of the Basin Commission. That is to say, they influenced the politicians in that region or part of the basin. We could not in any way, say, approach the member states and establish such commission without first convincing our politicians. That is why at SADC level, the issue of transboundary water resource management was discussed at length until the SADC protocol emanated, then followed by member states themselves who were sharing the transboundary waters. To that end, we ended up having Orascom agreement, which established the Basin Organization. I should mention that the organization during its inception was run by the member states themselves. However, they realized that in terms of programs and issues that need to be addressed and implementation as well, things could not move. Hence, there was a need to have a secretariat. Therefore, the 4 member states agreed that we should have a secretariat, that is a person or an office which will run the programs sanctioned by the 4 member states. We then started having a secretariat run by 1 person. He is our executive secretary, not here, Mr. Lingerton. I know most of you know him very well. After some time, it was realized that the secretariat team alone cannot handle the number of issues that are in the basin. So we had to make sure that there are task teams involved from the member states which would assist our secretariat. And we also had council as the senior decision-making body. And I, as the commissioner, I'm part of council. We call ourselves council when all the commissioners, representative commissioners from the 4 member states, that is 12 commissioners, 3 from each, are at the meeting. That's when we call ourselves council. And we inform our states in terms of decision-making on technical issues. There were a number of disputes in terms of the border, that is downstream of the basin between South Africa and Namibia. This issue has been taking so long. I think it's more than 120 years as one raised. The dispute has been there ever since. But with the existence of the commission, the dispute, I cannot say it has been solved, but it has subsided as we speak, because the water resources management became the major part in terms of the major and important issue in terms of the resource sharing, the allocation, and the benefits that could be benefited from there. There is also Lesotho Highlands Water Project, which I think you all know about it. The main purpose of the project is to ensure that South Africa gets water from Lesotho. There's water transfer from Lesotho to South Africa, and Lesotho benefits in terms of power generation and royalties from South Africa. But that itself raised issues and some kind of dispute in terms of downstream countries are concerned. And specifically, I must mention that Namibia got worried that the project and its further phases, if you continue implementing the project, will end up downstream not having enough water. That means it decreases amount of water that reaches our estuarine. The estuarine being the place declared as Ramsar. So, that being two ensuing dispute, the basin had to be formed, and it creates a platform for sharing information and discussing all issues pertaining to water resources management from upstream to downstream. The manner in which dispute are handled in the basin, as alluded to in our agreement, are in terms of amicable settlement. That is in the form of consultations and negotiations among the member states. Otherwise, if we are not able to solve any dispute, that will be referred to the tribunal at a certain level. And it's very fortunate to say that at this level, since the inception of the basin, no dispute was ever leveled to the tribunal at a certain level. We've been able to solve our dispute through consultations and negotiations. How have we benefited from the Basin Commission? We are now able to conduct joint studies. For instance, a joint basin survey was conducted twice, that is after 5 years, and that survey deals with the river health itself and the environmental issues. We are able to share information. We can easily and jointly develop our basin water resource management. We also share cost. Recently, we have just been able to develop basin-wide IRWRM plan, which is in its infant stage in terms of implementation. In terms of financing, member states contribute to the running of the secretariat and the running of the programs of the secretariat. We also have a contribution financial from the donor partners, either directly or indirectly. And we are able to secure these funds from the donor partners for one reason. Our basin is a bit stable in terms of its governance structures and even the commitment that we get from our politicians. As we speak now, we are working towards ensuring how we can get into the position to say that we are financially sustainable in terms of implementation of our programs and the running of the secretariat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is really my honor and pleasure to be here, to have the opportunity to present the case of the Sava River Basin, which is the largest basin of southeastern Europe, with the area of approximately 100,000 square kilometers. You can see a few maps actually showing the region and the Sava River Basin. So the river itself is approximately 1,000 kilometers long, just for your better feeling of the size of the river and the basin. Approximately 9 million people live in 5 countries sharing the Sava River Basin. And I would say this is a story about the nations that used to live together in one country at the time of former Yugoslavia. And at that time, the Sava River was the largest national river of the country. And also, water resources were managed on the basin level. Following the geopolitical changes in the region in the 1990s and the decay of former Yugoslavia, disintegration into a number of pieces of new countries, there were a number of consequences. The first one was that the Sava River turned to an international river, so it became an international river. There was also fragmentation of water resources management on the national level of newly created countries. Fragmentation of systems for information and data sharing, forecasting, warning. So practically, after these changes, there were no more integrated basin-wide systems. Also, the region experienced a sharp decrease of economic activities related to the water use, primarily navigation, but also river tourism and all the others. And just for your, again, better feeling of the situation, I can say that it was for the reason of not only low, say, level of trust among the countries and complex political situation, but also the existence of unexploded mines remaining from the war in the riverbeds of all rivers in the basin and also on the banks of the rivers in the basin. So there were plenty of challenges actually to deal with. And in 2001, actually some 5 years after the conflict ended, the countries recognized the need to develop a new international legal framework in order to manage water resources on the basin level again. And the process started in 2001. It was not an easy task, actually, to establish this framework for cooperation. And there was a mediation also in the European Union that brought the countries together to a table to discuss how the legal framework should look like. And I would say that this was actually the main driver of cooperation, the need for this international legal framework for cooperation in the Sava River Basin. But what was the challenge in the process is not only the low level of trust among the countries in the basin, but also the fact that the priorities of the countries were quite different one from another, ranging from navigation development, tourism development, hydropower use, flood protection, water quality and quantity management. So I would summarize it this way. The only way for the countries to end up with an agreement was to make the legal framework sufficiently broad so as to cover all these issues and to have all the countries recognize their interest in the cooperation process. And that is how the framework agreement on the Sava River Basin was created in 2002. It was signed in 2002 as the very first development-oriented multilateral agreement in the region concluded after the war, after the peace agreement. It is also important to note that this agreement is really broad to integrate all aspects of water resources management. So not only protection of water ecosystem, management of water-related hazards, but also all kinds of water use. And this is the basis for the work of the Sava River Commission, which has 4 member countries at the moment. Montenegro is the 5th country, is cooperating on a technical level, but it is expected to approach the group of the countries soon, so to be the 5th member country of the Sava Commission. And there were a number of achievements, actually, through this process. I will mention some, like development of the very first river basin management plan for the Sava Basin, flood risk management plan that is being developed right now, climate adaptation plan for the basin, development of systems such as the geographical information system for the Sava River Basin. It was complemented by the hydrological and meteorological information system. The flood forecasting and warning system is being developed now. Many activities have been performed in the direction of rehabilitating navigation of the waterway of the Sava River. Also on development of river tourism, and I can tell more in the panel, in the discussion, and also in the group sessions. And also what is very important is that the Sava Commission is a platform for development and upgrade of the policy. First, development of protocols, additional protocols to the framework agreement on the Sava River Basin, which is a part of the legal framework for cooperation, international law, and also harmonization of regulation, procedures, methodologies to be applied by the countries. Also, guidelines, policies like data exchange, hydrometeorological data exchange policy that we developed recently. So that is basically the circle of activities that we are working on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for introducing me. I am chairing the Rhine Commission. I must say I'm very honored to be here, and I'm very impressed what I've heard already this morning, how much interest, hope there is to move forward. In the sense, I can say the Rhine did not come with a great success overnight either. It took a long time, so don't give up. Work on, and there is always a good end, we hope, and that I hope to show to you. Can I have the next slide? Because I'd like to tell you where the Rhine goes, because that's an important point, of course. The Rhine goes from the Alps into the North Sea. So it passes France, Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands. And the upstream country is, of course, Switzerland, France and Germany, and the downstream country is the Netherlands. That's an important fact, because, as you know, the Netherlands has a port, which is Rotterdam, and the ships go from Rotterdam up to Basel, to Switzerland. That is an important element where everyone cares a lot about. On the other hand, the country downward, of course, the Netherlands, has all the problems from the countries upstream. So when there is something happening in Switzerland, it has an effect in the Netherlands. And that was the basis, effectively, for the solidarity among the member states in this water basin. You see there are inhabitants 60 million. It gives drinking water for 30 million. It has a shipping lane of, I cannot see it from here, but 1,200, I think. And that is an important fact. And the main industry in Europe, chemical industry, is effectively in Germany, in the middle, I must say. And there is a lot of steel industry, there's a car industry, there's a lot of agriculture. All kinds of industries which are not very kind to water quality, which is an important element. On the basis, can we see the next slide? There you see the member states of the International Commission for the Protection of the Rhine. We have 9 member states: Switzerland, France, Germany, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and then, because it's the water basin, Austria, Liechtenstein, Belgium, and the European Union, and Italy. So it's quite a number, and I must say Germany is represented in this forum with 8 other sovereign states, because for environment in Germany, the states itself are competent and not so much the federal authorities. So that is the composition of our commission. Can you give the next slide? In the building up of the cooperation after the Second World War, it was really to get acquainted with each other, because you can imagine the war had given some serious problems among the member states and among the neighbor states. So it took a long time, a very long time, to understand each other, especially on the French side and the German side, but also on the Dutch side, to understand what is effectively what we are doing, what is it what we want to do, and what are our scientific backgrounds, because it came out very clearly that everyone had a different scientific culture. We did not understand each other in that sense. So all these were small steps, talking to each other, and not as it was at the beginning, my method is better than your method. No, it was sitting down over the time and getting acquainted effectively with the different methods, seeing how you could solve. Once more, it took time, it was talking, and we did not progress very much in the sense of the improvement of the quality of the water, but it was an important element to understand each other. Then came what you see here, a terrible disaster, which unfortunately so often in environmental policy you need. You need sometimes, I must say, something which is the déclencheur, which helps to get realized that we are doing something very important. There was a fire in the upstream country of Switzerland. It was in the pharmaceutical industry. All that water with the poison of chemicals came into the water. As you see, the river Rhine was completely dead. There was no fish anymore. There was no plant anymore. There was nothing. It was dead. And that was the turning point for the Rhine. People went into the street. People on all sides, being French, being Swiss, being German, being Dutch, they went in the street. They went to demonstrate that we do not want this anymore. We have to do something. And politicians understood it, which is not always the case. But here they understood it because they had to go for the electorate. So that was a moment effectively that it changed. The ministers then came up, and I must say that was a great idea. First of all, with a plan for 20 years for an integrated water policy. It is a water policy which has water quality, it has water quantity, it has all the elements which should be with it. It is about floodings, it is about dry water, everything is completed in it. At that moment, the International Commission was a very important element which had been funded, the Commission, the Water Basin Commission, of an international treaty. It's an international intergovernmental organization in which all these member states come together and had to work within this time frame of 20 years. And it has been a success. And it has been a success because if you see this picture here, I will not go into it much further, but you see that there are many subjects which perhaps are for you, if you see it for the first time, very technical, but that is the only way to move forward, not with great ideas and stop there, no, really again from bottom up. What are we going to study? What are our results to see? These are meetings which take place every day on the different levels. And then twice a year there is at the highest tier. So that is an important element. You see the secretariat is there on your left side. It's a small secretariat. It has 12 people. It has a small budget because most of the budget comes from our member states. It is the budget for the cost of the staff and that kind of things, but it is not a budget to finance the big projects. That comes from the member states and that comes from the European Union. So that is a very important element. Always having, yes, 2 minutes, I'm ready. 2 minutes I have to end. Will be a success. Here you see, this is a picture once more to show and illustrate the integrated water policy. You see the fish, you see the high water, and you see the other part. What is important, what I did not tell you yet, is that in that plan, which was made by the ministers after the disaster, it was only for 20 years, but they had a dream. They had indeed a dream, and they had a symbol. Their symbol was to have that fish, which we saw before, the salmon, back from the North Sea into the River Rhine, spawn again into Switzerland, and go back. And that, for everyone, was something which the citizen, which the stakeholders could understand. And I think that was a very important thing, to have symbols. So my message is, twice or thrice, 3 things is effectively work, 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 and talk, talk, talk with each other. It is have a long-term plan, and have a symbol where everyone can really come together and which they like to move forward. I think I leave it
there. Can you hear me? Well, good morning. It's a beautiful day here in Jordan. I want to thank EcoPeace for the opportunity to be here with you all. There are so many individuals that have helped us over the last few days in seeing the Jordan River and the entire system all the way from the north to the south. And it would take me an hour to go through all the folks that have helped us. I'd like to thank Commissioner Salmon for being here. It's always a pleasure to travel with you and to work with you. The U.S. has a very strong working relationship with Mexico, both economically and socially. And we're very confident that that relationship is going to continue to grow as we move forward. Today I'm going to focus my comments on how, from a war-torn period between our countries to today, we have found ways to work and live peaceably together and have in fact taken our differences and made them strengths. I will describe the establishment of the International Boundary Water Commission from the early days to the present, and will speak to you about how, through cooperation and in many sectors of life and business, we have forged a strong bond. The mission of the IBWC is very simple. It's the application of our boundary and water treaties between our 2 countries and resolving differences that occur in the application of those treaties. I will also describe, at the request of the directors of the event, the political and environmental forces that both past commissioners and I have had to deal with. The United States and Mexico have not always enjoyed a strong economic and social relationship. As I alluded to a few minutes ago, there was a period in our country's history that we were enemies. In 1846, 170 years ago, the Mexican-American War was raging, and for 2 years we fought bitterly for land and control of what is today much of the western part of the United States. This war resulted in tens of thousands of Americans and Mexican casualties. It was a war of attrition, and while we study it today, we should not judge the actions of our forefathers from today's standards, but we should learn from them, and indeed our 2 countries have done that. The Mexican-American War ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, and Mexican and United States boundary commissioners were appointed by our respective presidents, and were given the job of setting the markers that are set between our border. And that border, by the way, is 3,100 kilometers. Part of it is river, part of it is land. The first commissioners were tasked with applying their engineering skills to set the boundary and water, set the boundary where it was clearly easily agreeable to, and to negotiate differences as they were attempting to survey that boundary, and respond to the needs of their respective countries. Another treaty that the United States and Mexico has developed was in 1889, when we signed a treaty in order to resolve a boundary dispute. There was also a river, the Rio Bravo, Rio Grande, that's between our two countries that meanders and it changes course, so it created some conflicts within our respective duties and responsibilities. And it also was well known in 1889 because it established the first commission. It was called the International Boundary Commission. The U.S. and Mexico Treaty of 1906 was the first treaty between our countries that focused on water accounting. It involved the Rio Grande, and some of the slides that you'll be seeing up on the screen will show where the Rio Grande flows from the United States south and where Mexico picks up its water, and it was proportionally divided between our countries. It was done in a very equitable and fair manner. And in 1944, our two governments entered into a monumental treaty that directed how the waters of the Colorado River and the Rio Grande would be shared, and called for the continued study of the Tijuana River. The 1944 treaty specifically placed the responsibility of water management on the newly named International Boundary and Water Commission. The 44 treaty expanded and clarified the use of minutes as a way to formally commit both countries to implement or interpret treaties. The minute is a separate formal action between our governments and places the same degree of obligation on each of us as do the treaties. So today, more than ever, due to the population growth that we need to address along the border, includes water quality, water accounting, water management, all of those have where we need to do specific interpretations of use minutes. Today, the Commission has 320 minutes. The 44 treaty also gave us a specific structure in order to work out these differences as they develop. Presidentially appointed commissioners, each of us has one. We also have two principal engineers. We have a secretary and a legal counsel. Now, before I describe the political and environmental forces we deal with, let me mention a very important component in dealing with such forces, and that's communication. In order to deal with these forces, you must be willing to discuss and openly and honestly share your information that you carry into these conferences that we have all the time. You must develop a level of trust that comes from really learning about your neighbor and the problems he or she faces. One significant communication advantage that the two commissions have, the two sections of the one commission have, is that we're located 20 minutes apart. That makes it much easier for us to travel to see our partner. We communicate regularly with emails, texts, letters, messages. We even have a messenger that travels between our two countries and shares information as it's developing. Now, in dealing with political forces, let's first compare the two countries. In Mexico, water and environmental matters are centrally regulated and managed by the federal government. While in the United States, water is allocated to each of the states, and there are individual water rights holders within those states as well. Each state also has separate environmental laws and agencies. The states, however, must meet or exceed the requirements of the federal government. The federal government has oversight when national matters are involved, such as treaties or natural disasters or droughts occur. As an example, the political force we are dealing with today involves a drought that for 16 years has plagued the Colorado River Basin. The United States section of the IBWC is taking on the federal government's role in trying to understand the situation and develop an alliance with Mexico. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which is a federal agency in the United States, is dealing directly with the individual states so that they understand the impact that drought is having on us. The first order of business has always been to openly and honestly discuss with Mexico why we believe we are in a severe drought. Then it has been a matter of being completely transparent. The United States and Mexican engineers, which you can see in some of the slides that are rotating through the screen there, sit side by side, reviewing different strategies to protect the system. We have already approved 4 minutes that are building blocks as we build towards a permanent solution. Now I'll mention a few points regarding environmental forces that we are dealing with. Since the passage of the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, as often referred to, which created open trade between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, millions of people in Mexico have migrated to the border. This huge increase in municipalities and industry has stressed the environment all along the 3,100-kilometer border. The economic disparity makes compliance with environmental laws we both have very challenging. We've had to learn to partner proportionately in order to achieve the results we both want. Over the past 70 years, the United States and Mexico have developed water management practices for agriculture and municipal supply that included constructing large dams along our major boundary rivers. As I had described earlier, the Rio Grande and the Colorado rivers, which are two of them that are southwest border and northeast border in Mexico, are situated in a position where our communities need them. Some of you may recognize it on the slides. Those of you who have visited the United States or Mexico and may be familiar with it. But one of the consequences of these water management efforts has been the detriment of the riparian environment due to lost flows that are now being stored in reservoirs. For years, environmental groups have sought to help the states and federal government in order to try to address these environmental concerns. A portion of the ecosystem has been regenerated by some releases. And we have a model in Minute 319 where the United States and Mexico cooperatively developed a minute that addressed the severe drought that we're having, and water conservation was included, water shortage was included, water quality was included, and yes, of course, the environment was a key component of that. As a matter of fact, it received probably the most notoriety because it was something that I think we are all very sensitive to. Another environmental challenge addressing us in the Rio Grande. Different environmental standards exist between the United States and Mexico. And that is a 2,000-kilometer border that we have. Over the past 20 years, since the NAFTA was approved, millions of people have moved to the border region. This rapid growth has stressed the water supply and water treatment facilities, principally in Mexico. The U.S. Clean Water Act that Texas has adopted to protect the rivers and streams is not being met along the Rio Grande. Mexico's criteria is less stringent, yet there has been conscientious attempt to try to clean the river and maintain it at the level it needs to be maintained. So we're working together to do just that. The sentiment years ago was that Texas was trying to force upon Mexico certain compliance. It did not work. After years of discussions and negotiations, in September of 2013, IBWC signed the Terms of Reference entitled United States-Mexico Joint Cooperative Actions in the Lower Rio Grande Basin. It formalized the process to address water quality. We are today developing binational action plans, and in 2017, we are on track to have a binational agreement where these action plans can move to implementation. In conclusion, I've only described a few of the issues we are dealing with and given you a general view or overview of the International Boundary Water Commission. Our success today is because we do not only look at our respective countries' best interests, but we try to look at the developing problems from each other's perspective. In this way, We have been able to solve problems and set up frameworks to address the growing challenges that we have, working together by using science and engineering to analyze situations, and we have been very successful in managing those waters between our two countries, and the boundary challenges that we believe are still ahead will be met with vigor and success. Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you. And
well, good morning, and thank you, EcoPeace, for inviting us to be here. Commissioner Rosina, as always, it's a pleasure to travel with you and share with you moments of discussion and thought during these trips. Well, I'll try to complement what Commissioner Rosina has said already about the relationship between Mexico and the U.S. We share three watersheds, transboundary watersheds. Two of them are very large, and there's one little one that is the Tijuana River. And I'll try to talk about briefly what are we doing in each one of these basins. The Colorado River is a huge basin. It's about 7 times the size of Jordan. It goes through 7 states in the U.S. as it goes to Mexico. 99% of the watershed is located within the U.S. and 1%, less than 1% in Mexico. And we share the water of the Colorado River because of the 1944 treaty that was signed between the two countries. Here, we had, in the 1960s, a conflict that developed between the two countries. The United States was delivering salty water to Mexico, which was damaging the agricultural producing district, irrigation district, and this led to a bitter discussion about the quality of the water that was being delivered to Mexico. This came about because the treaty, though it was able to solve the distribution of water, it was silent in terms of the quality of the water. It didn't include water quality. So after a long period of discussions, the two countries came to terms, and we signed a minute like Commissioner Rosina mentioned, is a binding binational agreement that both countries have to comply with. So we signed Minute 242 in 1973, and that solved the salinity problem. Later on, in 1984, 1985, a new conflict developed. The U.S. decided to line the All-American Canal. Those of you who have been to that area, this is a huge canal that goes through sand. So the water that seeps, the percolation is huge. So they decided to line the canal in order to make a full use of that water. This created a conflict with Mexico because the seepage was going underground to Mexico and it was being used by Mexico. It was a legal battle there, and finally a court ruling against Mexico stopped the conflict. Our two governments decided that we need to do something. That conflict was not leading anywhere, and we needed to find new ways to solve our differences. And then in 2007, both governments issued a joint statement, whereby they instructed the Commission to set up a scheme in where both countries could sit down and talk to each other and try to find new ways and to benefit both countries. This was the beginning of the Colorado River binational cooperation process, which had its first meeting in 2008 under the guidance of the Commission. This process had a very slow start. There wasn't much interest in either country to sit down, I mean the stakeholders to sit down and start talking. There was no motivation, there was no need to do that apparently. Okay? But after a while, we started to become friends. We started to going to lunch together, we started to going to supper together, we started having a glass of wine together, a beer, and that changed the situation. But there, in 2010, there was a massive earthquake that destroyed part of the infrastructure in Mexico, and that was the turning point, the momentum creating situation that sort of woke up these binational talks, and we started doing things in a much faster way. In 2010 we signed 3 minutes, and by minute 318 is a minute that allowed Mexico to store treaty water in U.S. infrastructure. This was never heard of. This was impossible before the earthquake. So it was like a very significant event, a natural event that changed the whole thing. Now we worked for 2 years on a more thorough agreement, and in November of 2012 we signed Minute 319, which is a very wide-range, comprehensive minute that addresses, among other things, the quality of water, what to do in case of shortage of water, how to share surpluses. It included for the first time U.S. investment in Mexican infrastructure. It opened the possibility for trading water. It allowed Mexico to store water in the U.S. It addressed environmental conservation and restoration issues, and allowed for the participation of stakeholders, especially for the first time NGOs, in the negotiation process. The small watershed is the Tijuana River. This, we call it the Forgotten Basin. We don't have any water distribution problems in this basin, but we have other problems. This basin drains north from Mexico to the U.S., and it carries a lot of trash, sediment, raw sewage. And this creates a myriad of environmental problems in the U.S. coast. In 2009, government agencies and NGOs on both sides of the border were working to mitigate this situation, but they were uncoordinated. They were working by themselves in the U.S. and in Mexico. We knew that everybody was doing something, but there was a lot of finger pointing. You blaming each other, and it was not leading anywhere. We were not solving the problems. So the Commission made an effort to get all these groups together, and it helped. This meeting, it was a meeting about this size, it helped those groups to be aware of what each one were doing, and they realized in that meeting that they all had the same objective, which was to have a healthy basin. So we organized the actions of these groups, and we signed a minute, which is our last minute 320, and it established the framework on how these groups will work to solve the basin problems. So we did, I think, pretty good in that respect. So during these past 10 years that we have been commissioners, we have learned that it really helps to schedule regular or meet on a regular basis. Because when you meet on a regular basis, it brings people together. And bringing people together let people know each other, and it creates trust. And when we have trust, we start talking about ideas, and we start talking about solutions. And with ideas and solutions, we have projects and we have actions, which finally translate to benefits for both countries. So far, for us, it has worked. On the Colorado River, basically, the same group has been meeting monthly for the past 9 years. And in the Tijuana River, the same group has been meeting for the past 5 years, monthly. Now, all of this is a learning experience for us. And we're trying, I didn't mention Rio Bravo, and we're trying to apply all this knowledge to the Rio Bravo. So that's basically what we have been doing in the past 10 years. Thank you very much.
So thank you all commissioners and secretary generals for those great comments. And just to the organizers, I understand we're have a speaker before the break. Is that correct? Right. So we're going to go for maybe 8 to 10 minutes more so that we have time for the speaker. And then, so these folks already know I just take charge. You give me up here and I take charge. Then we have a break that's going to be fairly lengthy because they're going to rearrange the room, right? So we're still going to get our break. Correct. Okay. So I wanted to follow up with a few questions. And but first I want to make an observation, and I think it relates to, by the way, the very excellent study that was presented right before our panel. I've had the chance to look at that and review that, and it's got a lot of great analysis in there. And there's always a challenge between how many case studies do you include versus not include, because if you get to too many, you start losing the thread and the themes and so forth. And so if you look, when you look at that and you see some of the themes that come through about why they were formed and how they operate and how they're structured, one thing that came through, I think, loud and clear in these comments is that there are often these external major drivers that wake people up, that make them realize. You had the fire in the Rhine. I mean, in the United States, we had the fire in the Erie Canal and so forth that led to major environmental legislation. You had the breakup of a country, right, into smaller countries. That was a major driver. And as you heard, while you had the commission, the International Boundary and Water Commission operating for years, it took this natural disaster of an earthquake in 2010 that led to some things happening really quickly. I mean, it was really amazing, I think, to see how quickly some things happen. But we always say we don't want it to take some natural disaster. We don't want it to take some crisis to, spur us into action. And that's always, when you're out there in the real world doing things, the challenge of how do you motivate people and so forth. So kind of trying to make a segue to motivating people or engaging people, I wanted to put forward the question. It's come up in some case in the last discussion, but how does your commission, your Basin Commission, involve the public, and then the expert stakeholders and the non-governmental organizations, the civil society as it's often called? And I thought maybe I'd start with you and then see what others would like to add.
Thank you. Well, in our case, we are trying our best actually to be as transparent as possible. And the Sava Commission has developed over time a number of tools for public participation and stakeholder involvement. Okay. And I can mention a number of examples. One is certainly the Sava Water Council that the Sava Commission established a year ago as a standing advisory platform of the Sava Commission that brings together representatives of all other sectors, so not governmental, but non-governmental, academic and business sectors. So this is a platform that actually meets occasionally and goes to the agenda of the Commission and provides advice to the Commission. So that is one example. There are other examples. I think I can mention here is a number of capacity building efforts that relate to primarily national institutions, administrations taking part in the process. And we actually try our best to ensure funding for all these activities, so that to bring all experts or representatives of ministries together at no cost for the countries, but at a cost from the ongoing projects. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take the lead on that point. If those of you can see the screen up there, one of the ways that we're able to communicate with the communities along the border is that we have offices within all along the 3,100 kilometer border. And in those offices, we have men and women that are in charge of taking care of the levee control, as well as for stormwater, wastewater monitoring, water quantity delivery monitoring, and a variety of different subjects. And Mexico has a sister office across the border. So as issues develop along the border, they communicate regularly. And they reach out to the community in a variety of different ways. We have citizen forums in several of those offices where we invite the community to come in and tell us what type of problems they see that are occurring involving commission business. So when they come in, it won't be a room this large, but we'll have 30 to 40, maybe 50 people at those sessions. They share their experiences and their problems with water quality, water management, environmental concerns that come up. And so that has helped us a great deal in trying to open it up for the public, but as well as for our offices to deal with developing problems. So each one of those offices has leaders in charge of reporting back to the headquarters, which is in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, Mexico.
When that wake-up call came because of the pharmaceuticals, nothing was organized, it was spontaneous. Afterwards, effectively now, it's based on our legislation. We have 19 NGOs and stakeholders in all our meetings, except when it is staff and budget. But for the rest, on all topics, they are present. They are listened to, they are consulted, and they have their influence. Sometimes they give enormous, especially on the ecological continuity, they are very important because they give a very strong incentive. On the other hand, it's because I want to say it's not only the green NGOs, it's also the companies. The companies want to be there because they realize that effectively it is a question for their reputation to have good legislation and to participate in the decision making. So it is a win-win for everyone.
Thank you. At Orascom, we also have a stakeholder participation roadmap. The instruments guide us in terms of how we engage other stakeholders beyond the established institution structures. In different member states, there are we have expectations that the established structures in terms of tax teams go down to stakeholders in terms of informing them of how we are dealing with transboundary water issues, and even gathering ideas on how how the river impacts on their life on a daily basis, so that we could be informed by their ideas and impacts at that level. On the issues of, I've made reference to the Joint Basin Survey. The exercise is done in line with the communities. And at the same time, we also have capacity building programs that we run together with stakeholders and NGOs and within the private sector at the basin level and at nation level. Thank you very much.
So I think we're out of time, but the good news is we have the breakout sessions to get into some of these issues in greater depth. So please all join me in thanking our great panelists.